Welcome to the realm of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Enjoy listening. Vince Tucker was waiting late into the night for his friends to call. He was an expert diver, making his living off underwater expeditions and salvaging operations. Earlier in the day, a friend had told him about someone in need of help, someone Vince couldn't easily refuse. Always practical, Vince said he'd take on the task, provided they agreed on payment. His friend quickly summarized the situation. Some alien acquaintances had dropped an important device into the sea, one that held significant value to them. They hadn't disclosed what the device actually did, but their desperation was apparent. Intrigued yet skeptical, Vince agreed to meet them at the specified location the next morning. The following day, Vince ate breakfast before his phone buzzed. It was his friend, informing him he couldn't make it to the site, but assuring Vince the alien women would be waiting for him there. Vince found this bizarre. The whole situation felt like something out of a sci-fi film. Despite the oddity, his confidence remained intact. Throwing his diving gear into his car, Vince donned a navy blue pair of shorts and headed out. With the radio blasting, he drove with an unusual sense of excitement. His mind swirled with questions. What could these alien women have dropped? Why were they here on Earth? Whatever the answers were, he was determined to find out soon enough. When he arrived at the secluded beach, Vince parked and stepped out, leaving his diving gear in the car for now. If this turned out to be a prank, he didn't want to look foolish. Approaching the shoreline, he spotted two figures standing by the water. Their faintly bluish skin glimmered in the sunlight, and their striking features stood out. One had deep red hair, the other platinum blonde. As he walked closer, Vince greeted them. "Hey, are you Paul's friends?" The red-haired woman spoke first, her voice soft but deliberate. "Yes, I'm Nara. This is my friend, Olesta, and you must be Vince, the diver. We need your help." Vince nodded. "All right, tell me what's going on." Olesta stepped forward, her tone urgent. 2 nights ago, we landed here unexpectedly. During the landing, a holographic mapping device fell into the sea. This device contains critical galactic travel routes and secrets. If humans get their hands on it, it could spell disaster for us. Please, Vince, you must retrieve it. We'll reward you in any way you wish if you succeed." Vince raised an eyebrow. "That's not exactly what I expected to hear, but okay, I'll give it a shot. Let me grab my gear." As Vince walked back to his car, he could feel the women's eyes on him. Their gazes lingered a bit too long, and he smirked to himself. Sliding into his wet suit, he returned to the shore and began his dive. The water was cold, but Vince was focused. His flashlight cut through the murky depths as he scoured the seabed for hours. Schools of fish occasionally obscured his view, and the growing chill began to seep into his bones. Frustration mounted as time dragged on, and he muttered, maybe this was a waste of time. Just as hope was fading, his flashlight caught a metallic glint. Heart-pounding, Vince swam closer. There, wedged between rocks and partially buried in sand, was a small, intricate device. It hummed faintly, almost as if alive. Vince carefully freed it, feeling its subtle energy pulse in his hands. This must be it, he thought, relief washing over him as he began his ascent. Breaking the surface, Vince swam back to shore where Nara and Olesta were anxiously waiting. He placed the device before them, and Nara immediately examined it, her expression one of intense focus. Olesta's face lit up with gratitude. "You did it. Thank you, Vince. As promised, we'll give you whatever you desire. Just name it." Vince hesitated, his mind replaying everything that had happened. Finally, he said, "I only have one request, but first, I need to know the truth. Why are you really here, and what does this device actually do? Is it just a map, or is there something else?" The women exchanged nervous glances, their silence revealing more than words. Nara opened her mouth to speak, but hesitated. When she finally started, Olesta cut her off abruptly. "Vince, there's no need for more questions. Just tell us what you want," she said, her voice firm but uneasy. Without waiting for a reply, Olesta turned and walked a few steps away, pretending to inspect the shoreline. Seizing the moment, Nara moved closer to Vince, her voice low and urgent. "Vince, I need to tell you the truth. This isn't just a map. It's a portal, a device that can transport someone from Earth to our home planet. Olesta plans to use it on you. She's captivated by you, Vince. But once you go through, there's no coming back. I'm telling you this because I don't want to lose you. You belong here. Vince's heart raced. The weight of Nara's confession was staggering. He stared at her, his thoughts spinning. Before he could respond, Olesta returned, her demeanor unchanged. Vince managed to mask his shock, forcing a casual smile. I'm going to put this in my car for now, he said, lifting the device. Why don't we relax for a bit? The beach is beautiful, and we could use a break. The suggestion lightened the mood, and soon the three of them were sitting by the water's edge, laughing and talking. Vince used the moment to gauge Olesta's intentions while weighing his own options. As the sun began to set, Vince leaned in and kissed Nara gently on the cheek. Turning to Olesta, he pressed a brief but deliberate kiss to her lips. Both women looked surprised but pleased, their tensions momentarily dissolved. Finally, Vince spoke, his tone steady. Olesta, I know everything. Nara told me about the portal and your plans. But hear me out. We don't need to leave. We can stay here, together. We can build something new, something real. What do you say? Olesta's expression shifted from shock to contemplation, then to a soft smile. Maybe you're right, Vince. Maybe we can make this work. Nara, though visibly hesitant, eventually nodded. If that's what you want, Vince, I'll stand by your decision. As the night deepened, the trio returned to Vince's home. Together, they dismantled the portal device, symbolically severing their ties to the stars. For the first time in a long while, Vince felt a sense of peace. Yet even as they sat around the remnants of the device, a quiet unease lingered in the air, an unspoken acknowledgement that their decision carried consequences they couldn't fully anticipate. Nara stared at the dismantled pieces of the portal, her expression a mix of relief and sorrow. It's strange, she said softly. For as long as I can remember, I've lived with the idea that home was among the stars. And now, here we are, choosing a different kind of life, a different kind of home. Olesta, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. Home isn't just a place, Nara. It's people. It's connection. Maybe that's why I couldn't leave Vince behind. Maybe that's why. She hesitated, glancing at Vince before her voice dropped to a whisper. I think I was searching for something all along, and I didn't even know it. Vince, sensing the weight of her words, placed a reassuring hand on Olesta's shoulder. You're not alone in this, he said. Neither of you are. We'll figure it out together. One step at a time. The night stretched on as they shared stories. Nara and Olesta recounted tales of distant galaxies, their voices tinged with wonder and nostalgia. Vince, in turn, spoke of his life on Earth, the challenges of his diving work, the beauty of the ocean, and the simplicity of a life rooted in the tangible. As they talked, a newfound bond began to take shape. It wasn't just the thrill of their unusual encounter that tied them together, it was the understanding that they had chosen each other in a moment when the universe seemed impossibly vast and indifferent. At one point, Olesta stood and walked to the window, gazing up at the night sky. Do you think they'll come for us? She asked, her voice barely audible. Nara exchanged a glance with Vince before answering. Maybe, but not for a while. We've covered our tracks well enough for now. Besides, they don't have the portal. They won't risk a full search mission for us unless we become a threat. Vince frowned slightly, and if they do come, Nara's expression hardened, a hint of her resilience surfacing. Then we'll be ready. We're not defenseless, Vince. Trust me on that. The conversation drifted to lighter topics, and soon the trio found themselves laughing over the absurdity of their situation. Three strangers from entirely different worlds, brought together by fate, now planning a life that none of them could have foreseen. As dawn approached, Vince suggested they get some rest. Nara and Olesta shared a knowing smile before nodding. They'd been accustomed to constant vigilance, but tonight felt different, safe even. Vince set up 2 spare bedrooms for them. But as he turned to leave, Olesta caught his arm. Wait! Her eyes met his, earnest and unwavering. Thank you for everything. I don't know how to say it, but thank you. Vince gave her a small smile. You don't have to say anything, Olesta. We're in this together now. That's all that matters. She nodded and released his arm, retreating to the room. The days that followed were an adjustment for all of them. Vince taught Nara and Olesta the basics of Earth's customs, how to navigate human interactions, use technology, and blend in. They, in turn, shared their knowledge of alien sciences and cultures, which fascinated Vince. Despite the challenges, the trio fell into an easy rhythm. Vince's once solitary life was now filled with companionship and purpose. The house, which had always felt too big for one person, became a lively space filled with laughter, debates, and shared meals. But their peaceful days weren't without their share of tension. One evening, while Vince and Nara were preparing dinner, Olesta stormed into the kitchen, her face flushed with frustration. "I can't do this," she said, her voice trembling. "Hiding, pretending. It's suffocating." Vince set down the knife he'd been using and turned to her. "Olesta, we've talked about this. It's for your safety. For all of our safety." "And what kind of life is that?" she shot back. "I didn't come here to live in fear, Vince. I came here because—" Her voice faltered, and she looked away. Nara stepped forward, placing a hand on Olesta's arm. "I know it's hard," she said gently, "but we made this choice. We're building something new here. Something worth fighting for." Olesta looked between them, her anger giving way to vulnerability. I don't want to lose myself in all of this." "You won't," Vince said firmly. "We won't let that happen." Olesta nodded slowly, her tension easing. That night, the three of them sat by the fireplace, sharing stories and dreams until the early hours. It became a ritual, a way to remind themselves of the connection they were forging. As weeks turned into months, their small household became a sanctuary. The bonds they shared grew stronger, rooted in trust, love, and the unshakable belief that they had found something rare and precious in each other. Each day brought new challenges, but also new discoveries about themselves and the lives they were building together. One crisp morning, Vince woke up to the sound of laughter outside. Pulling on a sweater, he stepped out to find Nara and Olesta in the garden, engaged in what appeared to be an intense game involving pebbles and sticks. Nara, her usual calm demeanor replaced by fiery competitiveness, threw a pebble with pinpoint accuracy, knocking over a precarious stack of sticks Olesta had built. Olesta groaned dramatically, falling back onto the grass. "This game makes no sense," she exclaimed, pointing an accusatory finger at Nara. "You're clearly bending the rules to your advantage." Nara smirked, crossing her arms. "You just don't like losing." Vince chuckled, walking over. "What's going on here?" "We're trying to invent Earth games," Nara said, her expression softening as she noticed Vince. "Turns out Olesta isn't as strategic as she claims." Olesta sat up, brushing grass off her hair. "It's not fair. I didn't grow up with primitive games like this." Vince laughed, shaking his head. "How about I teach you both something more traditional? Ever heard of Frisbee?" By mid-afternoon, all three were running around the yard, the sound of laughter echoing through the crisp air. For a moment, they felt utterly normal, just a group of friends enjoying a simple pastime. Vince realized how much joy they had brought into his life, how much fuller his world had become. As the days grew colder, the trio began to prepare for winter. Vince showed Nara and Olesta how to chop firewood and winterize the house, tasks that were met with both curiosity and exasperation. "Why do humans make everything so complicated?" Olesta muttered as she struggled to balance a log on the chopping block. "It's not complicated," Vince replied, demonstrating the proper technique. "It's practical. You'll appreciate this when it's freezing outside." Nara, watching from the porch with a mug of steaming tea, called out, "Or we could just invent a device that regulates the house's temperature." "That's called a heater," Vince shot back, grinning. "But we're doing this the old-fashioned way." Despite their complaints, both women quickly adapted to the tasks, their alien precision and strength proving unexpectedly useful. By the time the first snowfall arrived, the house was warm, stocked, and ready for the season. One evening, as snow fell gently outside, the three of them sat by the fireplace. Vince had found an old board game in the attic and was attempting to explain the rules, though Olesta kept interrupting with questions that spiraled into tangents about human behavior. "So you're telling me the goal is to trap the other player's pieces?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "That seems unnecessarily confrontational." "It's strategy," Vince said patiently. "It's about thinking ahead, predicting your opponent's moves." Nara leaned back, her arms crossed. "Humans really like conflict, don't they?" "Not conflict," Vince corrected. "Challenge. It's how we learn and grow." Olesta seemed unconvinced, but she gave the game a try anyway. By the end of the night, she was gleefully declaring herself the undefeated champion, much to Vince's amusement and Nara's mock annoyance. As the season progressed, Vince began to notice subtle changes in both women. Nara, who had always been reserved and calculating, seemed to open up more, sharing stories of her past and even laughing freely. Olesta, on the other hand, started to exhibit a quieter side, her sharp wit tempered by moments of reflection. One evening, Vince found Olesta sitting alone by the window, staring out at the snow-covered yard. He approached quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. She glanced up at him, a small smile playing on her lips. "I was just thinking about how different things are now. How different I feel. In a good way, I hope," Vince said, sitting down beside her. She nodded, her expression softening. "It's grounding, being here, with you, with Nara. I didn't think I'd ever feel this way. Safe at peace?" Vince smiled, his heart swelling at her words. "You deserve that, Olesta. Both of you do." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, the warmth of the fireplace wrapping around them like a blanket. By spring, the trio had settled into a routine, their lives intertwined in ways none of them could have anticipated. They worked together, laughed together, and supported each other through every challenge. Vince taught Nara and Olesta more about human culture, while they shared their advanced knowledge with him, sparking ideas that could revolutionize his diving work. Yet, beneath the surface, Vince sometimes wondered if their idyllic life could last. The device was gone, but the universe was vast and unpredictable. What if someone came looking for them? What if they were forced to confront the past they had tried so hard to leave behind? But every time those thoughts crept in, he reminded himself of what they had built together, a sanctuary, a family, a love that transcended worlds. No matter what the future held, they would face it together. As they stood outside one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Vince took a deep breath, feeling the cool breeze on his face. Nara and Olesta stood beside him, their expressions serene. "We've come a long way," he said, his voice filled with quiet wonder. Nara nodded, a rare smile gracing her lips. "And we still have so much further to go." Olesta reached for Vince's hand, her fingers warm against his. "But we'll get there, together." In that moment, Vince knew with absolute certainty that they had found something truly extraordinary. And no matter what lay ahead, they would face it side by side, their bonds unbreakable, their love infinite.